bring this down if we can. Swing that around. There we go. And yeah, man, it appears we are live. What's up, everybody? It's Mr. Drew here to welcome you to another episode of the Andrew Glowczewski Experience. This is going to be episode 266, and we are going to start working on some rocket launchers. And yeah, man, let's just jump into it. I got Top Hat Gaming Man talking about, what is this video? The confusing history of Renegade. The game that changed everything. Alright. Let's see what that's all about. Other than that, I'm just going to get in, start drawing this rocket launcher. No attachments, no nothing crazy. So it's just going to be a straight up draw. These things, I don't know how long they're going to be. You know, they're probably going to be short videos. So, hey, it is what it is. Alright.
There's a jolly good chance that you're a fan of beat-em-ups. After all, in the past on here, we have taken in-depth looks at many giants from the genre, including the Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, and Final Fight franchises. None of these great series would have ever been conceptualized, though, if it were not for one 1986 game that essentially started it all. In today's video, we are going to go back in time and look at the brawler where it will begin. A title that would go as far as to invent many of the tropes that would go on to be associated with the genre itself. In this very special episode, we shall be exploring both the unique Japanese and Western versions of this game, and explaining the perplexing history about how both of these tailored experiences spawn their very own unique lines of games. In particular, we are also going to take a deep dive look at all of the Renegade specific titles, that of which were only ever made available in the West. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the confusing history of Renegade, one of the most influential games ever made. Yeah! Word that has pretty much been associated with video games since the entertainment medium began. But when it comes to fist-to-fist human combat, many of the earliest experiences recreated for video games were in the form of humble combat sports. Early examples of this include Sega's rudimentary 1976 black and white arcade game Heavyweight Champ, which simulated boxing, or Vector Beam's arcade game from 1979 known as Warrior, which featured vector-based graphics that allowed for fencing-style duels. These games are obviously vastly different combat to what will be found in future titles, but it is interesting to go back and look at the first approaches made. By 1980, we continue to move closer to the beat-em-up genre with Samurai by Sega, a game where players are tasked with killing all opponents on screen before fighting a boss samurai. While we take the trope of facing off against stage boss after stage boss for granted today within our video games, we rarely actually give much thought to where this concept actually came from to begin with. Well, many early Japanese game developers just so happen to be massive fans of Hong Kong martial arts films, with the 1970s delivering many classics. Many believe that bosses found in our beat-em-ups and other video games originate from the Bruce Lee martial arts movie Game of Death, a movie where he literally fights through a gauntlet of bosses. Bruce Lee's movie Enter the Dragon would also massively influence fighting in video games, with the popularity of a mysterious international martial arts tournament also weaving its way into arcade play, with the likes of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat being some of the most prevalent in the fighting game genre, with games like Karate Champ laying the foundations for the tournament fighting genre as a whole. Everything has to start somewhere, you see, and the beat-em-up genre, as we know and love, like the tournament fighters, started out due to a video game creator's admiration for Mr. Bruce Lee. The man, of course, we are talking about is a gentleman who we have talked about to death on here about in the past. I am, of course, referring to the godfather of beat-em-ups himself, Yoshihisa Kishimoto, the genius behind the Double Dragon franchise and cooperative brawlers as a whole. But before all of this unfolded, the future legend was a Data East employee, producing early arcade laserdisc games, such as 1984's Cobra Command and 1985's Road Blaster, games that were hugely different from the future genre the man would invent. Despite these titles being far from a man's most famous work as of today, back then the games would grab a lot of attention. So much so that another company, Technos of Japan, would approach Kishimoto, proposing a meeting to discuss developing laserdisc-based games on their behalf. Kishimoto would accept the offer to meet. However, during this encounter, he would make the decision to pitch a different idea entirely, one of which had nothing to do with laserdiscs whatsoever. During this discussion, Kishimoto would bring to the table an idea of creating a completely unique game that was different to anything that had been created previously in history. The concept he had in his head was a game that was inspired by unique elements indeed, in that he would pitch the idea of a quirky, semi-autobiographical game, with a character in it based on himself from his high school years, who constantly gets into fights on a daily basis. Kishimoto recalls a rough period in his life unfolding that was triggered by a girl who dumped him in high school, so wanted to combine elements of this narrative with his love for Hong Kong martial arts movies, resulting in a title that would be known as Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun, a game that functioned differently to anything that came before it, with gameplay never seen before, allowing for knockdown, drag-out fights. This was a far cry from other martial arts inspired games from the period, such as Kung Fu Master from 1984, that featured simple one-hit kills. Kunio-kun, on the other hand, required players to hit opponents many times, meaning they had to literally beat them up. Coin in return, beat them up. The game was also completely different to everything that came before it, due to the title featuring environments that were scrolling arena-like spaces, with action being presented from a perspective that allowed for more strategy and combat than with any game that had come prior. Directly translated, Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun means hot-blooded tough guy Kunio, with Kunio being the star of this new game. The game featured a story of this high school delinquent standing up against a series of rival gangs, that of which constantly target his fellow friend and classmate Hiroshi. The game was beyond revolutionary in that, apart from allowing characters to move horizontally and vertically across the game's arenas, the game's combat was so developed that players
It's just delicious. It's huge. Go on and get yourself one today.
grab, charge, throw and stomp on enemies, a huge amount of options for a 1986 title. Further to this would be the first game in history where fighters could perform combo attacks, allowing gamers to replicate the high intensity of martial arts cinema like never before. Each stage in the game features a 3-screen playfield where players must take out every single enemy on the stage. After clearing the train station level and moving on to the second one, gamers must take out some opponents who ride motorcycles, with motorbike riding opponents consistently appearing across the beat-em-up genre for years to come. Something else you may notice, like the Bruce Lee movie Game of Death, every stage ends with a boss fight. Bosses are identified by the fact that they lay in wait in the stage background until a certain number of their cronies have been taken out before jumping into action themselves. Stage 3 sees Kunio take on a girl gang led by the large rotund Misuzu, a character who had recently resurfaced as a stage boss in the River City Girls video game. The old school arcade game culminates in the Yakuza headquarters, with the game's final boss being the gun-wielding Sabu. Players who managed to defeat him witness Kunio exiting the building to be congratulated by Hiroshi and his fellow classmates, bringing this historical game to a close. Well, kind of at least, as the arcade game loops, allowing players to carry on building on their high score. Now, that was the game the Japanese got, but what for the West? Higher-ups would make the decision that a video game about Japanese high school brawling and the Yakuza was not necessarily commercially viable for the West, and the game would need a whole new coat of paint for a different market, with a completely new story hook. A decision was made to create a graphically altered version of Kunio-kun, one of which was heavily inspired by the 1979 movie The Warriors.
I was about
Which
to
makes
say, The
perfect
Warriors,
sense when you
right?
think about it, when we bear in mind that the hit movie literally featured a plot that included various different gangs beating one another up. The game's story would also be altered to feature a plot of a hero rescuing his girlfriend who is held captive by a mob boss. Both the visual aesthetics and the story of this altered version would both be highly influential on the beat 'em up genre in their own rights, with many games in the future sharing elements that were first introduced in Renegade. In the opening stage, for example, the graffiti-covered vandalized underground train would become staple scenery in many games to come, as would the what I can only describe as whip-wielding hookers appearing in Stage 3. A style of enemy
Whip
strike that
wielding
would go on
hookers.
to appear in
Holy
pretty
shit.
much every single beat 'em up ever made going forward. Renegade has as much to answer for as the original Kunio-kun in terms of influence and legacy. The following year of 1987 would see the game ported from arcades over to the Nintendo Famicom, Japan's most popular gaming platform. From my experience, I have never felt that the Nintendo version of this game is talked about anywhere near as much as the arcade game, which personally I think is a crying shame, as the Famicom port is rather impressive and introduces a range of new stages too, while obviously being graphically scaled back from the arcade and allowing for fewer enemies on screen. The game features much more scenery, such as being able to fight aboard the train and featuring brand new features completely, such as an all-new motorcycle stage where players must kick opponents off of their bikes, road rash style, which all contributes to this version's appeal. Give this title a go if you have the chance. Just like the arcade game, the title would receive a new coat of paint and be released as Renegade on the NES, obviously featuring the same style action as the Famicom version of the game. In terms of other ports, with the title being such a commercial smash hit, of course the game would eventually be converted to run on pretty much every piece of viable hardware under the sun, with much of the conversions to computers in Europe being handled and developed by Imaginesoft and published by OceanSoft, with conversions in America being developed by Software Creations, then published by Taito. A particularly decent version of the game would arrive as late as 1993 on the Sega Master System, a version that was largely based on the NES version but featured enhanced graphics and cooperative play. This version was developed by Natsume in Japan, but only released in regions where the Master System was still popular, so Europe, Australia, and Brazil. As for the direct future of the beat 'em up, 1 year after producing Kunio-kun, Kishimoto would next produce Double Dragon, the game that would first introduce cooperative play and a scrolling stage-by-stage format that would become synonymous with brawlers. As for Kunio himself, the character would be used to spawn an empire in Japan, with him going on to star in many quirky sports games, along with the whole subgenre of beat 'em ups that would be chock full of RPG elements. These, of course, would be localized as the River City games, some of which I have covered in depth on here in the past, such as River City Ransom and River City Girls, for example. Kunio is still a big deal in Japan. But while Kunio-kun games are ultra significant to video game history, with River City Girls 2 currently in development, what for the Renegade brand that was created bespoke for the West? Well, believe it or not, Ocean Software, the British publisher who had previously brought Renegade to home computer formats, would take advantage of the brand in order to create multiple sequels that had nothing to do with the legendary Kishimoto or Technos of Japan. So let's see what else the Renegade brand has on offer. In 1988, the very same year Double Dragon 2 would hit arcades, under Ocean's Imagine Software license, Renegade sequel known as Target Renegade would be born. Released for various formats, the game would feature a cover of a topless Street Fighter performing a flying kick through a window. The image appears to be based on a picture taken of martial arts legend Joe Louis. That was featured on the book that he published, known as The World's Greatest Fighter, teaches you how to master Bruce Lee's fighting system. So as you can see, Bruce Lee ties into this narrative once more. The game that appeared on multiple formats, including being published by Taito on the NES, is often considered a fan favourite amongst microcomputer owners, with the basic beat 'em up offering a respectable experience that features the plot of a character known as Renegade who seeks revenge against a local crime kingpin named Mr. Big for murdering his brother Matt. Depending on which version of the game you play, the title varies between being 1 or 2 player, and in some versions, Renegade's brother Matt is being held hostage as opposed to actually being murdered to death. Renegade in this game continues to wear warriors-like apparel consisting of pairing a leather vest jacket with a pair of jeans. Target Renegades is a title that is often appreciated by home computer format users for being an early 1988 release that featured many great things the first Renegade game on many formats did not. This includes the use of full scrolling background stages along with new enemies and weapons. This is all paired with a great soundtrack that was composed by Gary Biasilon for the computer versions and none other than Tim Folin for the NES version. The Brit behind many legendary video game soundtracks, such as Lemmings and most notably Plot, a video game soundtrack that is so impressive Shigeru Miyamoto did not believe that the Super Nintendo was capable of producing such good music. The game was extremely varied for what it was, and certainly a lot more respectable than the majority of crap that seemed to be pumped out by Ocean Software at the time. In fact, for those who have nostalgia for Target Renegade, in 2006 an unofficial remake of the Spectrum version was released for Windows, expanding the multiplayer elements to allow 6 simultaneous players. Nice. 1 year after the release of Target Renegade, 1989 would see the third and final installment in the Renegade series released, which would literally be named Renegade 3 The Final Chapter. Published under the Imagine label once more, this game was exclusive to home computer formats, showing up on the Amstrad CPC, ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64 and MSX. Bearing in mind which hardware the game was produced for, I would imagine that Renegade 3 was likely a European exclusive. However, I am more than happy to be corrected. Interestingly, magazines at the time heaped a ton of praise on the game, with Crash magazine going as far to give it a 91%, and C+VG giving it 84%. Fans on the whole, though, have traditionally derided this single-player game, though, which environmentally does little to resemble the previous games in the series. If you thought that Double Dragon 3 has a stupid plot and design compared to its predecessors, then Renegade 3 makes the third Double Dragon game look sensible in comparison. In the title, as usual, players take control of Renegade, but this time he bizarrely has to travel back in time to save his girlfriend. The game in many ways is ridiculous as you fight your way through stages taking on Captain Cavemen and dinosaurs, before heading on to Egypt to take on mummies and other mythical foes. Further to this, action progresses to a medieval setting, before action finally leads us to space. Yes, that's right, a series that started out about a Japanese high school student defending his friend from gangs eventually devolved into this bizarre Euro trash, kind of based on the Warriors, that looks and feels like a poor man's Double Dragon 3 tribute act. How the mighty Renegade brand had fallen. While Ocean Software would decide to mutilate the Renegade license just 3 years into the franchise's existence, there is no denying whatsoever how influential both the original Kunio-kun game was, as well as its Renegade skin. Yoshihisa Kishimoto's work created massive strides in the world of video games, with the man single-handedly establishing the entire beat-em-up genre with the creation of this game. Then soon after, Double Dragon. Kishimoto is the Shigeru Miyamoto of the beat-em-up world. Without this ambitious title, there would be no Double Dragon, no River City, Golden Axe, Final Fight, or Streets of Rage. So many franchises have so much to be thankful for when it comes to this benchmark title. Renegade, aka Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun, really is one of the most influential games ever made. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the mad and bizarre, confusing story of Renegade. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of today's video and which beat-em-ups you would be keen for me to cover in the future. I've barely scratched the surface of the Kunio series. If you enjoyed today's video, if you have not done so already, I would massively appreciate it if you would click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so that I can ensure my upcoming content makes it straight to your devices. Finally, I would like to give a huge thank you to the kind people who back my work over on Patreon, assisting me to continue to make videos on retro gaming history on a full
No Yolks for bolder bowls of yum. Get inspired at noyokes.com.
Suck Professor. Hey everybody, it's me, Hank. I'm joined by James. There's James in the helmet. Welcome everybody to our Loki discussion.
Oh wow, yeah. So this is a channel that I haven't watched in a long time. Like they stopped putting videos up for a while. I found them while Westworld was kind of going on, and on HBO, and they were doing episode breakdowns and things like that, and they're so entertaining. It's these two guys that kind of powwow and talk about the shows and things like that. So I started watching them through there, but then after Westworld stopped, they stopped uploading, and it looks like they've been putting up video games and things like that since then. But yeah, I guess because of the non-interaction, like their channel just doesn't pop up for me. And I was just like, oh man, whatever happened to Suck Professor? That's the channel, Suck Professor. And yeah, I just jumped on. It looks like they did a Suicide Squad breakdown as well as a Loki season 1 breakdown. So this is the Loki video, and it's with the two guys. So let's see how see what these guys have been doing.
James, this is James's reverse Loki. That is actually quite right on for Loki, isn't it?
Yeah.
Welcome, guys, to our Valheim-based podcast studio. You can see that we're in the middle of a construction zone, but we still took some time out of our busy day being Vikings to sit down and have a nice, friendly chat about our favorite new television series called Loki.
I know what this place is.
We protect the proper flow of time.
You picked up the Tesseract, breaking reality.
I want you to help us fix it.
Available on TBS, Superstation, or WGN in the morning before the Bozo Show. Obviously, I'm joking. Those are the early days of television, the 80s. James, Loki took the world by storm. Now that Marvel is doing shows, as well as films, features, cinematics, cinemas, and all those other words, Marvel has gone back to its roots from when it made The Hulk, starring Lou Ferrigno.
Wow. Fucking love these guys already.
So we must let the world go on thinking that he too is dead, until we can find a way to control the raging spirit that dwells within him.
So now they're back to doing shows. And Loki hit Disney Plus just recently. Did you have any expectations for Loki when you heard of it coming out, or how did you hear about it? Just start talking.
Yeah. I was a little bit confused by it the same way I was confused by WandaVision. I haven't seen all of WandaVision, so I'm not going to talk about it that much. But, as everyone who's a fan of the MCU at all knows, Loki famously dies in the final movie in Endgame. Thanos crushes his throat, and he's gone out of the picture. It even says, no more tricks, no more resurrections. Mm-hmm. So it's an established, understood thing that Loki is no longer alive. But during the course of the film, when they travel back through time, there is that scene where Loki appears to do something outside of the realm of the normal timeline, and he steals the Tesseract and disappears. So we don't really know what becomes of the past Loki, but we know that the current Loki from our current experience is dead.
Okay. Yes. So Loki. So this show Loki resumes the timeline after Thanos is killed in his retirement hut where he's living, or no?
Yes and no. That timeline always exists. It's something that happened as canon. But the Loki that we're following is the Loki that was imprisoned in shackles, who stole the Tesseract. So this is a past Loki who has not yet experienced the events up to Endgame yet, and does not at the beginning of the series yet know that he has a moment of finality where Thanos actually kills him.
Okay, so I never would have known that. So the way by the way, everybody, lots of spoilers coming up. We're going to talk about the show and the various things. I don't even know where we're going with any of this. I know that James has a lot better information about it all than I do, but
not really.
No, it's true.
No, well, one thing that I should mention, and I like to get this kind of disclaimer out, is that the stuff we're talking about is based on what's in the television show.
Yeah.
And I am not at all attempting to speak with authority in any of this. I did not grow up with comic books. I would have if they were around me, but I didn't. I don't have a storied history with these characters from a childhood perspective. I have not spent years reading about them and understanding the different comic book nuances. I'm a fan who saw it recently, who has done a little bit of Googling and researching on things, and I'm kind of regurgitating what I've learned. So
Right.
I am not trying to be an expert on this, so I may get a bunch of stuff wrong.
It's
But
not, for sure.
speaking as a fan only.
Okay, no problem. And yeah, definitely not. You're not the Carl Sagan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh, yeah. Because I imagine it is intensely annoying for people who have grown up in that way with characters. Suddenly hearing a bunch of armchair historians who suddenly became experts of Loki and stuff,
Yeah.
Minutes after the premiere.
Armchair historians?
So I just don't want anyone to think that that's what's going on here. It is not.
For sure, putting out their bullshit on the internet like you and I are doing right now.
Well, I mean, doing it with the air
Yeah, it's like what I'm doing.
which we never do.
Putting my
I
bullshit
always
out there.
do. I am the king of Loki, okay? Fuck faces. I work for the Smithsonian Loki Research Institute. No, clearly not. But we are speaking with good faith and fun. Like, we enjoy this stuff. We're not trying to just be haters. This isn't just what we're going to whine and bitch about, but it's just going to talk about it and see where the conversation goes. And in trademark Hank and James style, we might have a few tangents that send us off into hopefully funny and entertaining, weird little diversions. Those can also be, I know we've had some people, listeners over the years that like those and some who hate them, which is expected. All right, so this Loki, though, we tried watching WandaVision. It's like we only watch things together. I would actually give that another slap, but it just I was just like, fuck this crap. This just feels like they're doing the same old joke. But I do want to, I have heard that WandaVision takes some interesting angles that might be worth giving another look. These lights are so strong. Hang on. But anyway, so Loki came by, and the way I understood it after the first episode, it was basically just a buddy comedy between they found a way to make Loki a cop, and now he's running around with Owen Wilson, and they're gonna have experiences in various ways, maybe like Law and Order Loki edition. Like each episode's gonna be Loki and Owen Wilson go out and they've solved some mystery, and look, there's a timeline confusion, and there's a few other characters. But as we learned as the series went on, it took on a much grander scope than I had anticipated. I had made some mistaken assumptions after the first or second episodes. You talk now, James.
It was like timeline crashers.
What's that?
Wedding crashers. Oh, that's all.
It's okay.
Timeline crashers.
Actually, that's pretty good. Actually, dropping in where they're uninvited into timelines.
Yeah, the whole point is they're trying not to do that. They're trying not to disturb anything.
Right.
Because they don't want to create additional branches. So you want to give like a brief overview of what the whole season's about?
Yeah, so Loki is a narcissist, and he ends up getting arrested and recruited by the SVU, the TVA, the Timeline Visual
This is
Authority.
immediately after he steals the Tesseract from the Endgame movie. So this is what happens moments after that event.
All right. You said it. I don't have any idea. So then Loki becomes a cop, and then he starts dating himself, a pretty blonde version of himself, which is every narcissist's dream, is to date a version of themselves. And then they almost kiss, and then they try to escape on a big plane, but then they're forced to stay there, and there's a bunch of bureaucratic people in a big library that chase them around. And they travel through doorways that they open up just like time bandits. And by the end of it, Loki has met the one who remains, who is the I don't have the actor's name, but the guy he's in.
Jonathan Majors.
Oh, Jonathan Majors. He's the starring role in the Lovecraft H.G. Wells Country. Lovecraft Country, who is a scientist who has caused all kinds of chaos and has created a defensive wall around himself made out of a ring of the various timelines.
Wow, what a way to put it.
Beats him up, and then Loki becomes their god.
A defensive wall around himself.
I think we saw an entirely different series.
Holy
That's what I saw.
shit.
No, I don't. I know he dates his own self. He
call
falls
that
in love with his lady, with female Loki. But no, they have an interesting relationship. I'm trying to be insensitive to the entire thing on purpose. I hope that's clear. But go ahead. You don't have to do beat by beat, but
Yeah, so effectively what it is Loki gets recruited. He's basically a prisoner. He's not really a cop in a sense. He's not on the same plane as the TVA employees who appear to be these immortal
yeah.
guardians of time that are at the behest of what they call the timekeepers, which are these three mythical figures that apparently created and control everything that happens within the TVA.
In this big bureaucracy that's kind of like police
Right.
slash just like central government that sort of runs the time systems.
Right. So they basically describe everything as events that were intended to happen, such as the Avengers going back through time to repatriate the Infinity Stones at the end of the in-game, and they describe things that should not have happened in the time zone, in the timeline, like Loki stealing the Tesseract. So there are certain trigger events that make characters become what they call variants, things that are happening outside the predicted nature of time.
Okay.
Loki happened to be one, so what they typically do is they go into the timeline and they prune or purge or destroy or remove these flies in the ointment that cause what they call branch events from the main timeline. So they want a singular timeline, and they constantly watch it on monitors, and anytime a branch starts to form, they jump in and they prune that branch, which I assume is what the term prune means, like you're like a bonsai tree or, botany or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Or the drink.
Right. So in this case, they choose not to automatically prune Loki because they have a vested interest in his services. They are looking for a bigger threat than simply the Loki that stole the Tesseract, because to them, the Infinity Stones and the Tesseract are small potatoes. They have them sitting in desk drawers, Infinity Stones everywhere, because magic and the influence of the Infinity Stones don't operate within their time zone. They're useless. They're just little pebbles to them. So they bring Loki in because they have another Loki variant that's running amok and killing their Minutemen, who are the people, the employees of the TVA. And they need to enlist his support to think like a Loki to help them bring this one to justice. And as the series goes along, you find out that this Loki is a female Loki, Sylvie, who you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So it's a good premise, though, is to say, well, we just created a setup where there's potentially infinite variations of Loki. We're not going to do infinite, but we can always come up with different Lokis. And then Loki, the guy from the Avengers movies at a local theater near you, goes around and is sort of the confidential informant slash deputized police officer, rounding them up. That could be its own series, but the show takes a more bigger structural, scopy, big, wide. That's what I really liked about it by the end of the whole thing. But you've done a great job at setting up that premise. So then he's sort of committed to this project a little bit, or at least we think so, because he's not really someone you should trust.
Right, Loki is the trickster god. He stabs everybody in the back, including his father, his brother, anyone he could conceivably be. He will betray for his own purposes. That is inherently who Loki is, and that's who Loki seemingly always will be until you see his growth and his character arc throughout Loki the TV series, or internet streaming series, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, the interesting thing really happens towards the end, where basically Sylvie was pruned, so to speak, as a child, where she escaped. She was taken into custody of the TVA because she was making a conscious decision at a certain point in time. And I've heard other people on YouTube videos and discussion threads since, this is not my original idea, but someone postulated that when she's sitting down on the steps as a child, playing with Valkyrie toys and things, that she was moving down a timeline where she was choosing to become a Valkyrie instead of becoming like the Loki that everybody knows.
Okay.
And her actions that would have led to the rise of a certain event that we'll discuss in a little bit would therefore never happen, or would happen, which would cause them to need to prune her because she became an anomaly on the timeline. And of course, as a child, she never understood this. All she knew was that she was having to run for her life from this omniscient, omnipotent TVA, and it basically ruined her whole existence. So she was hiding. You want to explain like where she was hiding and why it worked?
Sure. Yeah. So she was hiding wherever disasters kill timelines. Is that right?
Exactly.
Like she basically like cul-de-sacs or dead ends of timelines. So where they're like Pompeii is the first one. They sort of like that's the one they used to explain And as everybody knows, the volcano, is it Pompeii? Yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah.
The famous, well, God, who knows, Greek, somewhere along that Macedonia, Transylvania, one of those fucking places way back when. And Pompeii, if people just Google it, Pompei, I think. But the volcanoes were so sudden and so devastating that they actually have like people. It's not the word sterilized. They were definitely sterilized by it. That is for sure. When you have your body turned into ash. But there were people that were petrified. But that's also not the right word. But they were caught. Their bodies were found cradling each other and like in the shape in the fetal positions in which they fell and were hiding from the pyroclastic flow of this terrible disaster. Not a very fun day, as we like to say in the not fun day industry. So anyway, so she goes to this big. They go to this big disaster where. Why does she hide in the disaster? Because no one thinks to look at the end of a timeline. Is that?
Well, what it is that she technically was removed from the timeline because she was an anomaly. She was not supposed to exist.
Mhm.
So anywhere that she would hide would inevitably create an instantaneous branching event and would alert the TVAs to where she was going. And a branch event is basically if she goes somewhere she's not supposed to be and interacts with a person, that person's interaction with her will cause them to slightly divert, and everyone that they interact with will cause a slight diversion and so forth. It's that butterfly effect, that domino effect that causes the massive branching events. But if she goes and the only people she's interacting with are those that end of particular timelines that will all be wiped out in one fell swoop by a cataclysm, then really those branches are irrelevant and there is no effective future branch event because they all get wiped out and nothing really matters.
Okay, that makes sense. So they end up fighting her though, or whatever, or for some, whatever.
Well, Loki kind of cracks the case and figures it out, and the TVA never really considers it. When he tells it to Mobius, who's played by Owen Wilson, he has one of his wow moments. You do that a lot better than I do.
You do it perfect.
Yeah.
Just do it slower. Just do it slower.
If I could, I'd be doing that nonstop.
Wow.
Yes.
Do it slow. That's all I gotta do. There's no trick to it. Just.
Yeah. Well, no, I leave the perfection to the masters of Owen Wilson.
I'm gonna elbow you in the face next time I see you, James.
Ow. Just take the W off the front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
So.
what would Owen Wilson say if he was a cat?
Oh, there actually are cat videos where they edited out the meows and inserted wows.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Oh my God.
I thought we were gonna have a lot of fun with that one. Instead, you gave the credit to the rest of the internet. All right, go ahead. So Loki cracks the case, and now they're moving forward, trying to sort this all out.
Right. So in basically interacting with this other Loki, who is Sylvie, Loki becomes obsessed with her because, like the giant narcissist he is, like we mentioned, he starts falling in love with himself, or the variant of himself. So rather than, upon meeting her, return to the TVA and give them the information they would need to capture her, he follows her through a portal that she opens, and they become trapped at the end of universes of these different worlds until they almost meet their final fate after Sylvie tells Loki a very key piece of information, and what she reveals to him is that everybody at the TVA are variants.
Yeah.
Everybody at the TVA had a life before the TVA abducted them, wiped their memories, and put them into servitude for all eternity for them.
So now we're roughly around episode 3 or 4. We're sort of advancing the season story.
Yeah, and kind of to accelerate things as quickly as we possibly can. They get trapped at the end of this universe. They don't have their portal device that they need in order to escape, and they're sitting there watching as planetary devastation occurs, and they're about to be wiped away by, giant meteors hurtling into the atmosphere to take them out. But they decide to hold hands right before the moment of impact, and that the act of two Lokis in a universe they don't belong in actually making physical contact creates an immense branch that the TVA immediately sees, which they've never seen before, which causes them to open portals, which the Lokis are forced to go into in order to escape. And obviously, waiting for them at the other end are all the TVA guards. So they take them into custody, and both Lokis are now back in their collars in TVA, being interrogated.
Yeah, never cross the Lokis.
Yes.
Rule number 1. All right, so then they get back there, but now they start to create all kinds of dissension. Not what the hell we're about, but like they're causing upheaval in the TVA because they're convincing people that they're also variants.
Yes.
Forcing them to. Owen Wilson particularly doesn't take the news well, And so now they all want, and nor does the guard, who's like the main kind of like captain of the people who wear military gear.
Yes, B-15.
B-15. I never know that. So they're all starting to go, well, what the hell is this whole TVA thing, and who are these timekeepers? And so they go ahead.
Well, B-15 has a moment where she tracks down, or she actually goes into the cell with Sylvie, and asks her to come with her. She teleports her back to the end of one universe, like where that big hurricane was going on, and she says, use your enchantment, help me to remember, because it's almost though she has remnants of memories in her head, and she knows that something's not quite right. So Sylvie helps her to see, and all she does is sheds a tear and says, I look so happy. Because she got a glimpse of her former life. And we know Owen Wilson must have had a former life or Mobius always talks about his connection to jet skis and how he can't quite put his finger on it, but he always has this attraction to jet skis, which is kind of funny because I think at the end of the series, we're going to get to see him on a jet ski.
Also, somebody had to break that baby's nose. No babies are born with a broken nose, unless you have a very athletic mother who is doing a little bit reckless behavior.
Yes.
If you break your baby's nose, cool it. Just cool it a little bit.
Yeah, his nose comes from a splintered timeline.
Yeah, splintered cartilage.
Deviated septum land, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But
right.
I would say that the only other important thing to mention before we get into like the real meat of what we're going to talk about is Owen Wilson, Mobius's boss, is, I think they call her Judge at one point, and they also call her Renslayer and Ravonna. So her name is Ravonna Renslayer, and she serves as a judge on trials where they're trying to decide whether or not they're going to prune certain variants.
Okay.
And she seems to know more than she lets on. She's a figurehead who kind of operates things from a position of authority, and she's the one that ends up pruning Loki.
All right.
And, really we kind of have to jump forward pretty much into the prune universe to kind of make this keep going. You want to take that?
Yeah. I'm following you, man. Half the time I have no idea what the hell anybody's talking about with this shit. So yeah, I'm grateful that you're a guide here. You're like you're like Mr. Scrooge's ghost.
Okay. So really what happens in a nutshell is Owen Wilson's character, Mobius, begins to trust Loki, which he's reticent to doing because his entire career at the TVA is that he's assigned to the Loki case. He's seen tons and tons of Loki variants. He knows they can't be trusted. But this particular Loki, the one that we know from the universe that we watched over the years, is actually treating him like a friend and is kind of cracked through that shell. So Mobius now trusts Loki enough such that when Loki tells him the TVA is lying to you, he actually listens, feigns believing him, but does, in a deep down level, believe what he's being told. So he questions Renslayer about it, finds out that it's actually true, and she has to prune him as a result.
Prune Mobius.
Yes, she prunes Mobius.
Internal. So now it's like internal divisions and stuff. And,
yes.
But she doesn't know. Have we gotten to the part where they meet timekeepers?
Oh, that was the next part.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Sylvie's entire he's on death row to use a crappy word.
Yes, it's like fucking Napoleon's in here.
Yes. She only wants revenge because her life has been stolen from her. She hates the TVA. She wants to bring down the TVA. How do you bring down the TVA? You kill those who created the TVA, or at least those who believe created the TVA.
Yeah.
So she wants to get in front of the timekeepers so she can take them out. So eventually she is brought before the timekeepers, Loki, Sylvie, and Renslayer, and she breaks free, throws a weapon, cuts off one of the timekeepers' heads, and finds out they are just Chuck E. Cheese animatronic robotics. They are a pseudo dictatorship of this world. They are simply robots. So now nobody knows who's actually in charge of anything. So a big fight ensues, and Loki ends up being pruned from behind by Ravonna.
Loki gets pruned, right. Okay.
So now it's just Sylvie and Ravonna in a room, and they start saying, Ravonna is saying, I can help you. I will work with you. I want to know who's in charge too. I want answers as well. We can work together until the TVA guards bust in and Ravonna's turncoats back against her, and Sylvie self-prunes.
I see.
So that's when we find out that pruning is not the end. Pruning sends you to what is called the void, which is a pocket of existence at the end of time, where all the other Loki variants who have been pruned in the past live and breathe, and that's where this weird, bizarre Thor Ragnarok style of comedy and chaos ensues. And one of the best episodes in the entire series, where you get to meet old school Loki and alligator Loki and Loki. It's just it's a lot of fun. Child Loki.
Like teen Loki. I thought they did an interesting job with that. There's a whole lot of Lokis in there, and it must be just like as you said earlier, just like the best nutrients for people who are super into this stuff. Isn't there the Thanos helicopter?
There's all sorts of Easter eggs hidden in that episode. There's the Thanos copter from the early comics. Mm-hmm. Again, I was not a child reading these comics, but I'm aware that Thanos used to travel around in a ridiculous little yellow copter with Thanos written on the edge, because that's just so absurd in our time. In our time, Thanos travels through intergalactic space in gigantic battle cruisers that take up the entire sky.
Which is not absurd.
Which is not absurd.
That big hulking frame, the Mad Titan, and you shove him inside a little mini one-person yellow helicopter.
Right.
He becomes a lot less intimidating at that point.
Which, when in the 40s or 50s or whatever the hell, whoever thought of Thanos, those writers back then, that must have seemed like crazy technology. And maybe they could have an invisible plane. Wouldn't an invisible plane be like the ultimate in any kind of superhero technology that should never be made fun of?
Until you're trying to parallel park it and you start digging other people, it's just difficult.
Why are those two cars shaking? So other Easter eggs that jumped out?
I could have sworn that I saw Ronan from Guardians of the Galaxy. His ship appeared to be crashed out there. And it did seem like, I'm going to get this one wrong because I don't remember what it's called, but from the Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D., that giant hovering, like basically that aircraft carrier that hovers up in the sky that S.H.I.E.L.D. operates.
Of course.
I could have sworn I saw an engine from that kind of emerging from the ground. So I think that's there as well.
Nice.
Those are the only things I really noticed, though, was the Thanos copter, Ronan, and the Avenger ship.
I'm sure there's plenty of other stuff, so everybody let us know in the comments. Maybe a little community can help people find their own fun Easter eggs.
And there's a car with a pizza delivery thing on the top of it, which I assume is from something that Owen Wilson is driving around there. That's probably a reference that I don't get either, but it's too unique looking not to be.
Agreed. Yeah. How could the creators of the show resist the temptation to just squeeze all that sort of stuff in there, which you get to do when you have timelines intersecting with each other. One of my gripes with timelines stuff, which seems to be everywhere nowadays, is just like, it's all just resettable. There's no real, if someone dies, it's like, well, no, they didn't die. It's a show about with time jumps, so they could totally come back somehow. So it is a bit too convenient, but.
All right. Yeah, man, that's Suck Professor. I love these guys, man. When they riff and they go back and forth and they start breaking shit down, and you can imagine these guys breaking down Westworld with this similar kind of banter that they have, and yeah, it was so enjoyable. I wish they did more, man. I wish they did more. I think I tried watching some of their video game stuff, but obviously it's just like live streaming, and just like how I'm like so riveting when I live stream, just sitting there all quiet and shit, drawing pictures. You could see how like, oh, okay, yeah, when you actually have like people to speak to and speak with, and actually have a conversation, things can be a little bit more entertaining or something, just more watchable at that point. Anyways, yeah, this is it for this rocket. There's 4 of them, so there's gonna be for the next 3 days. So before we're up, before this week is up, I'll be done with this gun series. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this one. And we got 1 rocket launcher down. Like I said, they're pretty straightforward. They're interesting. I like the entire build, all the little gadgets and gizmos and all that other stuff. Again, I mean, working on all this stuff, it just makes me nonstop think about like space weapons, like Star Wars type shit. And it kind of makes sense since Star Wars was always like a utility. Like everything that was constructed in Star Wars was made for utility. So there's a lot of utility elements, I guess is the way to put it. Anyways, man. So yeah, it just reminds me of it, and like all these like thick and thin bands here. This little exhaust vent for like the heat to escape, and everything just has like screws, and oh man, it's just whatever, man. I like this shit, and yeah, man, this has been an enjoyable series. So now that it's coming to a close, it's time, not just yet, but we're getting there. Um, I'm just gonna be reminiscing about it for a while. And then hopefully when I work on props in the future, when I'm working on characters and environments, and I think of like relative props, I'll be able to kind of look back and pull from all of this information that I've more or less acquired over the time. But anyways, man, check out Suck Professor. They're a cool channel. They're cool, man. I like those guys. Anyways, that's gonna be the end of this video. Again, short and sweet. What is this? Like an hour long, maybe? Where are we at? 50 minutes. Yeah. So, yeah, if you enjoy this stuff, man, I'm G Mr. Drew on all socials. Follow, like, and subscribe. All those links are in my bio, along with my website, gmrdrew.art. Go check that out. Contact me through there if you want to hit me up for any sort of reason. And then, yeah, man, if you want more content like this, more videos, things for me to kind of get through everything a lot faster and things like that, I am a independent artist looking for like independent support or whatever. So I have a Patreon, and I have a Fiverr also for freelancing and things like that. So maybe check that out. I have a $1 tier just for regular general support, as well as, but starting at $3 a month, you get annual commissions from me, character portraits, anything like that. And, just think of it as like an Artist Alley experience, but just, online and digital and all that other stuff. But yeah, man, all those links are in the bio, no matter where you're watching this from. Watching this on my Twitch, man. What's up, Twitch.com? And then we have YouTube and my Patreon, man. You can watch these videos on my Patreon. They all end up on YouTube eventually. If you watch these on YouTube, they're old videos. Right now I'm about a month ahead of schedule, so you're catching like a month-old video. You want to see them live or just sooner, just catch them on Patreon or Twitch. Other than that, man, I'm G Mr. Drew. You've been watching the Andrew Glowczewski Experience, episode 266. Rocket launchers, rocket power. Thank you for watching. Love y'all. Peace.